So first off, let's say that this is our construction. So we have one slider main. Inside we have 3 images. And let's see how we can get those elements and be able to operate with them within JavaScript. So we open this HTML file with our browser. We press F12 and we click on the console. From the Elements tab, we can see our slider container here, and we see that our images are here. So in order to get them in JavaScript, we can use IDs. So let's try to type one ID here, and we call it image1. We refresh, and in the console, we'll just type document, get element by ID, and then we type the ID image. And we see that the image is returned, so we can manipulate it. For example, we can change its title. And if we again check the elements, we see that the title has changed to new title. Also, we can change the source of the image, everything which is contained inside its ID even. If you want to take not only one image, but all 3 of them, we can use another function, which is called document getElements by tag name. And we can grab all the images within our HTML file, elements by tag name. We see a collection of 3 images are returned, and they have index 0, 1, and 2. In order to grab the first image out of them, we just type in brackets its index. So this is our first image. The second one has the index of 1. And this way we can grab the images even without having to put manually IDs on each of them. As you can see, the document object model can become very large if you have not only one slider on your page, but other elements. In order to speed up the process of searching those images and to filter out only the images within our div element, first we will select the slider main, and second we will select the images inside of this slider main. Let's see how we can do this. So first we'll declare, for example, slider main, and we grab the slider main ID. As we can see from the code, it's slider main, and then we'll get all the images out of it. We'll just type, instead of document getElements by tag name, we'll use slider main, because this element we are saving into this variable. So we'll use this variable and we'll create another one, images, and in this variable we'll get the images from the slider main. So we will type getElements by tag name, and we'll type image, and we can also log them into the console. So we'll type console log and this variable images, and we see that we get again those images inside. We'll get 3 elements, exactly our 3 images. Using a predefined element like slider main, in which we would like to search for images, we will speed up a lot of the computations JavaScript is doing in order to traverse to the whole document object model tree, which is displayed here. Next thing we would like to discuss is what is loop in JavaScript and how to create one. So first, in order to create a simple loop, we'll just type for. We have one variable and we set its initial value. So we're looping from 0 and we set the border, let's say 10, and we increase this counter, this variable I. So we will start from 0, we'll end in 10, this is the stopping condition, and we will increase the I variable with 1. And then let's console log the variable. We run this function and we see that it started from 0, it ended in 9, and that's our basic loop. Let's say that we would like to make an array out of 3 names. We created the array this way. We put those brackets around the names, and we would like to console log the contents of the array, and we see that we have 3 elements of the array. If we want to print the first element, we'll just have to prefix it with 1 bracket. So we just type console log names, and we type its index. So the first element has index 0, then 1, then 2, and we see this is the first element of our array. If you want to print all the names, we'll use another loop. It's the same as before. We start from the 0 condition. We increase the counter until we get to the end of the array. So names length will be 3, but we will stop just before this, and we'll log what's inside the names. So the AI variable is coming from 0 to 2. If we start this loop, we'll see all of our names within the array printed. Let's say that we already grabbed all those 3 images and we have them in this array images. We used getElements by tag name for this. Let's say that we want to change the width of all of them. This can be done very easily. We just type a for loop, exactly the same like before, but this time we'll use images length, and we'll grab the images. It will be just the images and the current index of the image. And we'll type style, because this is their CSS property, width, and we'll type it equals to 50 pixels, let's say. We'll wrap it like this to become a valid CSS rule. We'll see that all those images, if we inspect them, we'll see that they have this property width of 50 pixels. We can also use getAttribute and setAttribute function in order to set certain attribute within the images. Let's say that we would like to get the title. Instead of typing .title, we can use also the getAttribute, and we type title. We can console it out. So if we start this, we should get all the titles of those 3 images printed on the screen. With setAttribute, we can change all the attributes we would like to manipulate. Now let's say that we would like to dynamically create an object and attach it to the document object model. So we'll create one link and attach it somewhere here. First off, we would like to have handle of element where we would like to attach this element. Let's say that we would like to attach it to slider navigation. So we'll grab this element. Then we start creating our element. Let's create a span element, document create element, and let's type something into our new element. In our HTML property, it will write something directly as a text inside of the tags of the element. If we type it, we'll see that nothing will happen. Even it will not appear here on the DOM tree. The reason is because this is created, but it stays only in the memory of the interpreter. So we'll have to attach our newly created element to the first element we grabbed. So it will be like element.append child, and we type which child we would like to append to our element. This is the newly created, so type new element, and we see that it appeared. Also, if we click here, it appeared as a child element. So this way we can create new elements and append them dynamically into the screen. Okay, our new element is created. Let's see how we can make it like if the user clicks on it to capture this click. So first off, we have this new element already created, so we can use directly the variable new element onclick, and we will make a little function without name or parameters. I will just console log clicked. One thing interesting to mention is that within our slider main, we have 3 images. This is the parent element of those 3 images. At the same time, slider main is child element of the parent of the slider, and so on until each of the document object model tags are having a parent of HTML. So each of those are children of the HTML root tag. For example, if we want to get all the images of the slider main, there is another way. We'll just type slider main.children. So in order to do this, we go into console. Let's say that we have one variable slider main, in which we have saved the document element by the slider main element. So if we walk this variable, we see that it points to the slider main element and it has those children. So if we try to log the children of the element, we grab exactly those 3 images. If we want to specify the first image because this is an array, we'll just type the index of 0 and we get to the first image. This time we will go deep into the self-invoking functions. Let's see first what one function is. It is just a function, and it can have parameters inside, and this is the body of the function, and it can have a name. Carousel equals function. We are creating a variable which will save the state of the function. And if it's just console log start, we'll have this function. If we try to run it in the browser, we will see that nothing happens to the console. We'll have to run it with the name of the function, parentheses, and semicolon, and we see that it runs. Next, if you would like this function to run automatically, instead of typing it all the time, we will just put those parentheses on the back of the function, so it will invoke itself. When we save, we see start appeared, and this is very convenient way of starting functions. Let's say that we have another function inside our function, which is called init, and this function actually will console log start. So if we initialize like this our function, we'll see that nothing will happen on the screen because we have to start this init function. Our function has to return this function init in order to start. An advanced way of returning functions in which we can choose what kind of function we would like to return to the users is called revealing module pattern in which we chose the function we would like to return. Just type public function and which function we would like to return. And by typing carousel.public function, we are just executing this inside function. So if we save and wrap the return statement into parentheses, we see that our code works. So we can have another function here, which is called init2, and to the public, we'll only expose this init function. This way we are controlling which functions inside our main function we are exposing to the public. Why we are using this pattern? Because there can be another function here init from another script, let's say, and this way we will not override this function. We are starting the init function without overwriting the functions of other scripts which might have been loaded before our or after our code. Because if we don't have this code, and let's say we use the same name of the function and we just start our function, if another code comes in between the starting of our function, actually this code will rewrite this one, and if we see to the user, it will be another script. So we will have a lot of problems with the variables and functions declared this way. That's why we are using this revealing module pattern in which we don't rewrite functions and we can start the init function and our function and they will behave independently. In order to achieve this functionality, first we'll start coding the HTML part, then we'll add styles and then the JavaScript to animate the transitions. First, we'll create the div with ID equals to slider container. It will contain the whole our slider. Then we create inside a div with the slider and slider main. They'll hold our images and we'll put 3 images inside with their titles. The titles will be used to create the effects of the caption, which will be movable. Afterwards, we create the placeholder for the captions and one placeholder for the navigation. As we can see, the images don't look quite right, but we're about to fix this by creating a CSS file and putting styles on top of it. We include a link to our CSS file. It will be an external file, and we will start styling the content. First off, we see we created a little border around our slider, and then we put a little bit of border radius to make it more rounder. We set height of the container, inner padding, and width. So we can see the container, but still the images are being out of it. With having margins auto, we can center the container around the page. Now we continue by styling the slider element. We give a property of overflow hidden in order to hide the images. And when we refresh, they will be inside of our container, as we can see. Then we'll start styling the images so they can appear not stacked on the bottom, but next to each other. We do this with the property float to the left. Now it's time for the caption element. We set a background color, some border on the top. We position the element on the bottom and giving white color to the caption, which will appear. Then we set the font size and set the font to be bold. We type a height of the element and we see that the element that appears on the top of the container. We'll fix this by giving position absolute, and after giving width property, we'll see the element above the image, creating a nice effect. We would like to have our cursor to become like a hand when we point to the slider navigation and images. So we create a rule for this by using cursor pointer, cursor hand. We're styling the links inside the slider and of course the images. So when the user points to the image to become clickable, let's add our JavaScript as an external file. We test by writing to the console hello or alert hello. We see that it works. So we can start typing our script. First off, we will create one global function, which will have its own variables inside so they cannot interfere with other scripts we have on our website. We'll call it Carousel. And then let's grab as much as elements we have in the HTML page. So we'll grab the slider, the images inside by using getElement by ID slider and getElements by tag name for the images. We do this for the caption and for the slider main. And then we try to run this carousel function. In order to run it, of course, we have to return it somehow as a variable, user variable, let's say. We'll name this variable as make carousel, and we see that it works. So our code works and it's protected by polluting the global namespace of variables. So for example, if there are other users using the same variables, they will not interfere with our. So let's start coding the carousel. First off, we check if it exists. If it exists, let's grab how many images we have there. So we see that there are 3. Of course, if you don't have images, again, we return from the function and the slider will not run. Then we set the width of the slider to 100% multiplied by the image's length. This way, we are making this effect of having 3 images lined up one next to each other. Then we grab all the images and we create a loop. So this loop, it starts from the 0 image to the end. For each image, we change its width of the proportional of the maximum width we set before. So if we have 3 images and we set the width of the main container of 300%, now each image will occupy 33% of the container size. Let's see if we can click on the slider and to see what will happen. So we do this by using onclick event handler. We switch on the console and we see that it works. For the images, in order to have bottom bar navigational, we'll create links. We'll create them with JavaScript and we'll put them inside the navigational bar. So we have already styled them. We'll just align them to be displayed in the center. We'll set a color to them and some text shadow to appear more nicely to the users. In order those dots to appear, we use this property a column before to put some content inside of those links because they'll be empty and they will not have any anchor text. So we just put one dot inside of them to be able to be displayed in front of the user. And we change the font size to 5 EM. And let's not forget to append those links we just created to the root HTML element. So we can see them appearing in the document object model elements in the browser. Those links will have a special property, which is called data index. We need this property in order to understand on which image the user clicks. So it will change from 0 to 2 in this example because we have 3 images. Let's set the first image. So if we are on the 0 index, while we are looping through all the images within this for loop, we will set the caption of the slider to the image title. That's what we are doing. So by modifying the inner HTML property of image caption and setting it to slider image 0.title, then we will add one function which will make this element to appear as active. When we have this property, the blue dot will become green. And this function actually states that if it's set such property, then reset its ID. So if we have link which is having ID of active, reset it. And if it's not set, just set it to ID. This is the second statement on the row element. And on the 12th row, we just save this element so we know which is the current active element. We save it into a variable. This is very useful because we need to know where on the navigation the user has clicked and which is the current element of the navigation. And we'll set the active navigation to the current element. And we see that this first dot has become green. So next, when we click on the image, we would like to get which is the current element at first, and then to display proper image of the next element. So let's get the current element. We'll create a function called setNextIndex, and we get the current index by getting the last saved element into the ID variable, and we get its data ID property. And we see the current index is 0 right now, and we can return it to the calling function. So the next thing, we will just increase this index. So if we are on the element 0, it will become element 1, and so on and so on, so the images could move. And let's make a slide check if we have reached the end of the image's length. So we reset and we go from the last element to the first by setting the current index to 0. Then we pass the index we would like to display to the display slide function. The role of this function is to change the navigation. First, let's see what we have for the navigation. So we will list all the child items of the navigational element. We see we have a collection of 3 child elements with the index. So by setting the index of the children element, we can easily go to the element we would like. and set the active to it. If we pass this index to nav children, we can go to the first, second, and third element. So the circles will move. And now let's write a function which will change the image within the container. First off, we will try to change the caption of the image by getting the image title. And then the thing that we would like to achieve is to move the second image to become the place of the first by manipulating the margin left property. If we subtract 100% from the overall width of the container, we'll get the second image. If we subtract 200%, we'll get the third image. So that's the trick behind the slider. And we are doing it with JavaScript. We'll change a little bit the onclick function. So we'll get the current index by getting the clicked attribute property of data index. And now what will happen if we click on each of the images? So we would like to set the next image to be displayed and to display it, of course. So let's write this function after correcting a slight error in the code on line 5 to get the slider caption and rerunning the code. We see that it works wonderfully. One last thing is to style the caption of the images. For this, we'll use transitions in order to be displayed smoothly. We'll use the CSS transition rule. So it will be a duration of half a second and the movement will be linear. As we can see, the effect is achieved. One last thing is to make this slider automatically play. So we will use the JavaScript function setInterval, which accepts as a parameter function, which will be run in a specific time. First off, we'll need to, again, display the next slide. So we take the next slide index on line 62 and line 63, it gets displayed. We already discussed this function. For the set interval, we will need to set in how many seconds it will repeat, calling this function inside. We'll use a special variable called timing. Let's set this variable timing to 1050 milliseconds. If we refresh, we'll see that the slider runs smoothly. This time we'll see how we can achieve the effect of having those navigation sliders on the left and right side so they can control our slider. For this, we'll go to our files. We have the HTML file, CSS, and JavaScript file. And in the HTML file, we will add our controls. Inside of our div with the ID slider, we will start typing span with a class of controls. And this will be for the previous button. The same thing we will type for the next control. We can type for the previous, the less sign. So it will be like LT with this special notation. And the greater sign will be for the next. So if we save and refresh our carousel, we see our navigation here on top. Let's style this navigation to appear appropriately in the slider. So we go to our CSS file and we'll add some CSS rules. And this will be for the controls. First, we'll position them an absolute. Then we'll give a cursor of pointer. So we'll get a feeling that we're clicking somewhere. Then we'll increase their font size. Let's say this size for REMs. We'll give a color and we'll give opacity of 0.7. We'll save. And now we see our sliders here appearing one on top of each other. Right, we'll solve this for the next slider. We'll just give a right position of 0. And the same we will do for the previous slider. We'll give a left of 0. If we refresh, we see both of them on their appropriate places. Now we'll center them vertically. We'll just give a top of 30%. And then we'll just style them a little bit with a text shadow. And we'll give them a bold font weight. When we refresh, we see them exactly positioned. So far, we don't want them to be displayed until the user clicks or hovers on our slider. For this reason, we'll just give a display of none for now. And yeah, they are hidden. In order to show them, we'll just use another CSS rule. So once we are inside of our slider with the mouse, we would like our controls, so this class here up, to appear. So we'll just type a display block. And this way, when the user hovers our slider, it will override this property here and it will show our arrows. Let's see the effect. We see that they are working once we are inside of our slider. So far, the CSS is ready. And let's code the actual movement of the slides. So this we'll do in our slider.js. First, we'll have to disable this function here, slider onclick, which for now, while we are clicking on the slider, it displays the next slide. We'll be disabling this function in order not to mess up with our new functionality with this navigation we are placing. So we'll just disable it. And now when we refresh, we see that the slider is not moving. For the click on the next arrow, it will be very easy. We'll just have to grab the arrow and to display the next slide. So we'll just grab the arrow by using document query selector. And inside, we'll grab our next arrow element. And when we click on this element, we would like to start an element function. This is actually the event handler we are writing. And we'll just like to display the slide. Actually, we will copy exactly this function here and paste it here. So we are displaying the next slide. In this case, we can shorten our code and just place the function inside here. If we save and refresh, we click on the next arrow, we see that it's functioning and the slider is moving forward. So the same thing we would like to do with our previous arrow click. This time we'll use the function setPrevious index. First off, we'll grab the current index. We'll get it from the attribute data index. In order to create this, we'll need the current active element. As you remember, we have it here in this empty variable, which is filled once we click on the element. So we'll grab from there. We'll just have to grab its attribute data index. So we use the document object model property getAttribute. Inside, we will type data index. So once we have this data index, we'll like to check if it's equals to 0. So if current index equals to 0, which means we are on the first index and we don't want to go back to -1. We'll just want to set the current index to the last index of the slider images. So we'll have their length and we'll just remove 1 from the length in order not to again cross the borders of the number of the images. In every other case, we would like to decrease the current index. Okay, we are ready. And one last thing, we'll have to return the current index to the calling function. We save, refresh, and when we click on the back, we see it returns. And when we're on the first element, it should return to the last one. So now we have this wonderful functionality to our slider. Okay, guys. Here we have two versions of the code. On the left side is the old version and the new version, optimized, is on the right side. Let's just discuss the more significant changes. For example, we have replaced all the var occurrences with const, which can optimize the memory footprint of the whole application. Also, the naming conventions we are using instead of, for example, here, small letters and then underscores, we're using capital letters in each of the words. Then getElement by ID is replaced with query selector. Let's move to the code logic. All right, so we have one active index that holds on which element we are currently residing. And in the setActiveNav function, we're passing certain index. And the first thing we do is to reset and remove the active class from the currently active index and to set it to the past to the function index. Then we update the active index again to the past element index. We have two new functions, get next index and get previous index, returning us what is the next element index and what is the previous one. And here we have also with this plus sign slider image length, a protection against division by modulo of the slider images length. Next, we move on to the visual optimizations. We see that before we were changing the margin left, and now we are changing this function using translate X. Basically, this is way faster and it causes less renderings of the browser. Apart from this, the logic is the same. As you can see, some of the loops, for example, here, the for cycle is replaced with for each. And further simplifications in the code we have here in this slider images for each function. Basically, in the add event listener function, we don't need any more access to our attribute data index, but we are just running the click function and we are displaying the next slide, passing the index taken from the for each loop. And as you can see, the changes are not that big, but for sure they bring simpler logic to our code. So enjoy the content, and if you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.